And maybe that's why you're not growing in your Christian walk. Now you don't like me because I've said all this. But it's true. Did you know that 98% of Christians never lead a non-Christian to Christ? 98% never lead someone to Jesus Christ. That's not true overseas. I've talked to missionaries overseas in other countries that say that they've never met a Christian who didn't witness their faith. But here, we think that we can do it without anyone's help. We can do it all alone. We don't need to hear from anyone. And the problem is, that's why we are spiritually out of shape. I'm here to say that if you'll give me an opportunity for the remainder of our time tonight, I'd like to be your coach. I know you have great coaches here every Sunday, but you've got to be willing to say, I can go further and faster with someone rather than coaching me, rather than doing it on myself. And though I am far from perfect, let me tell you, I'm still working on this. I'm here to say that I've been working on disciplines all of my life. Some come now naturally, others still take a lot of work. But I can say that I would not suggest to you tonight something that I am not trying to accomplish in my own life. And that's where Paul comes. As I mentioned, Paul coached Timothy, his son, in the faith. And let's go back to 1 Timothy 4:7. Let's get the whole verse. It says, do not waste time arguing over godless ideas and old wives' tales. But here's our verse again. Spend your time and energy in training yourself for spiritual fitness. Amen. Now, Timothy was a pastor at that time in Ephesus. Do some history, read history. Ephesus was known as the Las Vegas of its day. I lived in Las Vegas, so I can imagine what Ephesus was like. It was in the Mediterranean coast. It's the present day what we call Turkey. The city was a busy, cosmopolitan or busy city that had crossroads. It was a crossroads city. It was a big metropolitan city that dealt with commerce around the world. Everyone had to go through Ephesus. It was a judicial sanctuary also. In other words, that's where criminals would go awaiting trial. Also the temple of Artemis, one of the wonders of the ancient world, drew worshipers from all over the world. And it was mixed with the occult and money. Here you have a city, Ephesus, that was rich, it was busy, it was a sensual place, and there is where Timothy is pastoring. Kind of like San Fernando, or any city, trying to be a Christian with all this going on. The sensuality, the money, the crime, it was just all going on, and Paul wanted Timothy to be a good servant of Jesus Christ. So he says to him, you need to train yourself. Now the New American Standard Bible says, discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. A little bit different. And really, I don't like the way they say it because I don't like that word discipline. Because when I think of the word discipline, and I don't know what comes to your mind, but when I think of the word discipline, I think of sweating and pain. That's what I think. I think of 2-a-day practices in high school and college, and you just sweat and you're in pain, and it's all about discipline. It's about going to the weight room and lifting weights, and the coach yelling at you to run sprints, and when I think of discipline, it just turns me off because I think of all the pain that I'm going to go through. Matter of fact, I had a coach who would say, Gara, you can have short-term pain and long-term joy, or short-term joy and long-term pain. I had no idea what he was talking about. But now I think what he was saying, that if you'll do the pain now, it will pay off later. But if you're not going to, you're going to have a long-term pain kind of thing. That's what you're trying to say. And so when we think about Christian discipline, we think about pain. We think about spiritual disciplines. We think about the early monks that would lock themselves into rooms and not speak to one another, not speak a word for months, sometimes years at a time, practicing what they thought was spiritual disciplines. They thought that God would be pleased with them if they would discipline their lives. And so we have, I think, this view of what discipline is. What is spiritual discipline? And we forget what I believe Paul was trying to tell Timothy, that discipline, what it means and how it applies to our life. Now, contrary to popular opinion, there's no 3 easy steps to spiritual discipline. You can read books and they'll think, here's a shortcut to spiritual disciplines. Don't believe it. There's a great book called Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. He lists out 16 what he feels are important spiritual disciplines. It is a tough, tough book to read because it's tough to practice in your life. See, I don't want you to think that it's easy, and I don't want you to think that just because I do this that God's going to be pleased with me. It says spend your time and energy in training yourself for spiritual fitness. Now, if you do a little study, the word train yourself, or the word discipline, is the Greek word gumazo, where we get the word gymnasium. That's why the New American Standard Bible says discipline yourself. Good News Bible says keep yourself training for a godly life. The New King James Version says exercise yourself towards godliness. The Message translation says exercise daily in God. No spiritual flabbiness, please. I like the way it says that. I don't know, turn to your neighbor and say anything, but you get the point. The other translations say train yourself for godliness. The NIV says train yourself to be godly. What does it mean? Or Phillips translation, take time and trouble to keep yourself spiritually fit. The New Living Translation, what we read earlier, spend your time and energy in training yourself for spiritual fitness. See, the goal for all spiritual training is spiritual fitness. Another way of saying is that the goal of discipline is for godliness. It says train yourself for spiritual fitness or godliness. Now, my question is, what is godliness? I struggled as an early Christian trying to understand what godliness is. I assumed it was how people acted. That sister so-and-so is a godly person because look how she acts. Just listen to her pray. She makes sounds like, woo! She must be godly because that's what I pictured what godly is. What is godliness? Godliness simply means becoming more and more like Christ. So if Christ does woo, then that's being godly. But godliness means that you look more and more like Jesus Christ. Now, what does Jesus Christ look like? Not like the pictures we see in the wall, but I'm talking about his character. Jesus is loving. Jesus is kind. Jesus is merciful. Jesus is patient. Jesus is gentle and caring. He says that's what Jesus looks like. So train yourself to look like that. So there's actually a way that you can monitor yourself if you're having any progress in your spiritual life. Are you becoming more kind? Are you becoming more loving? Are you becoming more gentle? You say you are. Let me follow you on the freeway. Training yourself raises 3 points. Let's get to this and we'll say thank you, Jesus. Number 1, training yourself requires action. If you want to train yourself for spiritual fitness or to be more like Jesus, that's the key. I want to be more like Jesus in 2009, more than 2008. It requires action. You can have a coach, but until you get off the couch and take action, you're not going to change. It's the action that produces the conditioning. Every action